Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today I wanted to do a very quick overview of the Saturn return, what it entails, what it actually even is, but also how that's going to affect you. So Saturn is a planet, and when you have a Saturn return, that planet returns to the place it was when you were born. So let's see here, for example, we have got Saturn currently in Pisces, and that's my Saturn return. But February 13th, this will move down to Aries, and that will be for many of you a Saturn return. So check to see in your birth chart where this planet is. If it's in Aries, that's your Saturn return. And it's going to stay there until April the 12th, 2028. And as we can see, it's been in Pisces and it moves all the way down. It's in the very late degree here, so it'll be about 27, 28 degrees. And then we move all the way down to Aries. So, what does that mean for you? Saturn is a planet of growth. It is about maturity and responsibility. I am not only Saturn ruled, but just had the Saturn return, so I can really speak on this. It's a time for you to mature. It's almost like an initiation or gateway into adulthood. So it always takes place around age 27, because it can go in and out of different signs. So for example, we had it go into Aries last year, and only for it to retrograde back into Pisces. The Saturn return takes about 3 years. This is going to be a time of challenge, a time of commitment, and a time of sort of getting real. So a lot of people have themes of getting a full-time job, they get married, they divorce, they move in, or they have to take responsibility for something. It also depends on the house that it's in based on your rising sign. So for example, if you have Saturn return in the 4th house, you might have a little bit of a challenge with becoming responsible for a parent that's getting older, or some kind of niece or nephew, maybe even a pet or an animal. But for a lot of you, also becoming very responsible for yourself, moving house, or maybe even moving out of your family home and really going into the world as like, oh my God, I'm paying rent for the first time, and it really feels like for once I am mature. A lot of people fearmonger about the Saturn return because it can bring those levels of responsibility. And who wants to be responsible, right? We all just want to be a child inside. And I think it really depends on how you view life. If, for example, you're like me and you're a Capricorn rising, or maybe you're an Aquarius rising, you're Saturn ruled. Therefore, the Saturn return is never as difficult as you think it might be because you've already had the challenge of what Saturn is trying to bring you. If you are somebody who is completely new to Saturn, so maybe you have a Venus chart ruler and you're like, I don't really know what's going on there, you might find it a little bit more difficult. I think also Saturn return can be a time of real enlightenment. So it's an enlightenment that we are trying to process in the right way. And by that I mean, sometimes when we have things that happen to us, we kind of just panic and we don't really understand what the lesson is. Saturn is trying to bring us harsh lessons for us to understand. And ultimately, that harsh lesson is all about being mature. We know that adulthood is all about, curveballs being thrown at us. But when we're a kid, we're kind of shielded from that. So the Saturn return is the wake-up call, like I said, the initiation to adulthood. And you'll have 3 Saturn returns throughout your life, and I'll put the little ages here on the screen. So if your first one around 27, the second is much more in your late middle age, and then most people don't really see their 3rd Saturn return because, historically and statistically, people pass away during this time and they don't reach that old age, but some people do see their 3rd Saturn return. So it's not the only time you have it, but also the 2nd Saturn return, for example, is less about having adulthood and more about going into, okay, I'm starting to reach the point in my life where, I'm broaching a retirement and I'm understanding what I need to do with my life. It's much more of a spiritual awakening in that regard, rather than I'm getting divorced, I'm, getting a job, I'm getting real. And then the 3rd one is, well, again, most people don't see it, so it becomes a very, very spiritual return. So ultimately, the Saturn return is nothing to be afraid of. It's really just a time of getting real. And again, my Saturn return was fine. And I had Saturn in Pisces, which is a very difficult place for it to be. It's important to note that if you have got a Saturn in Aries, then that is debilitated, which means it's really difficult placement. That's because Saturn is very mature. It deals with constriction. And Aries does not like to be constricted. It's a warrior. It's very impatient and it moves very quickly. It wants to punch. And of course, if you try to put rope around someone that's trying to punch, it becomes increasingly frustrating. So it can be a little bit more of a frustrating time for you, purely just because it's so active. However, that being said, nothing to be afraid of. Remember, when you put in the hard work, Saturn will reward you. This is not a time to be lazy. It's not a time to cry and say, oh my God, why is life happening to me? Yes, that will happen. You know, it's only normal. But as RuPaul says, look into the darkness. Don't stare at it. Don't dwell in it, right? It can be sad for a moment, and then we move on and we put the hard work in. And again, I know that's such a difficult statement for a lot of you that may struggle with your mental health, because it's so hard to do that. But like I said, I'm Saturn ruled. I have that circumstance. It's not the worst thing in the world. You can get through it. Anyway, thank you for watching this very quick video. I know it's not super detailed, but I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer because I've been doing a lot of weekly horoscopes on the Saturn return and wanted to kind of say, you'll be fine. It's good. Drop a comment down below if you're having your Saturn return or what your Saturn is natally and how you're feeling about this transit.